Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're going to talk about the Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Taiwan, all of that stuff as one issue, the contraction of the empire. Let's talk. Hi, Garland here, and we're going to talk about let's have a discussion. You know me, you listen to my show, and you know I like to talk about things on a broad perspective. I like to talk about things on a from the perspective, a grand perspective, a worldwide perspective of and of regarding the empire, U.S. imperialism, right? So let's talk about that a bit when it comes to what's going on right now. Okay, and let me start. I was inspired by Laith Marouf. I heard him. Why don't I do this? Let me find the video real quick, and I will tell you exactly where you can find it because it really is. It really is. Darn it! I don't think I will be able to. Maybe here. No, history. There we go. Oh, I found it. This is a great video. I'm not going to watch it, but I'm going to open it up so you can see it. And you'll know where to find it. It is critical that you watch this. Lath is a good friend of mine, a brilliant guy. And let me just show you this. So when you get a chance, you can watch this video. It's on the Activist News Network, and it is Laith Marouf, Israel's genocidal campaign on Gaza and Palestine and the regional and global implications. If you go to it, it's Activist News Network. They have some very interesting stuff. It's one of the sites that I like. Dr. Horn, I interview Dr. Gerald Horn regularly, and he's on there. So watch that, and you will understand how I got inspired to think about the conflict from the perspective that I'm thinking about it. Okay, so we talk about the U.S. as an empire, right? After World War II, the empire, and what do empires do? We've talked about this. They expand, right? An empire expands. It's the nature of empire. I've said this often. The U.S. empire sees nations sees basically there's only two kind of nations in the world. Nations that we have conquered and nations that we intend to conquer. And the nations that we intend to conquer are the enemy. The nations that we intend to conquer are on the list of, these are enemies. These are the evil guys. They're all run by dictators. Remember recently, Joe Biden had this convention the last couple of years where he says this is we're democracy and we stand for democracy versus authoritarians, right? All this is the language of empire to imply one thing. Democracy means we have conquered this nation completely. And so much so, we've installed a government, and the government is acting in every way, economically, diplomatically, militarily, culturally, acting in every way that the U.S. empire wants them to act, right? Those are considered democracies. Authoritarian those are the nations that the empire feels is too independent. They're not listening. They need to be conquered. Now, there is, in fact, with Joe Biden's authoritarian versus democracy paradigm analogy, right? There's another group of countries, and that is the countries that are under the U.S. umbrella to an extent, but they can't quite call them democracies. They can't get away with calling them democracies. So they leave them out. And all that means is they've been mostly conquered, but maybe they haven't been conquered culturally. Maybe they haven't, they're not doing the woke stuff. They're not doing everything that they're supposed to do. Just maybe pushing back on some things. And the U.S. still has some work to make them, the Borg. Resistance is futile. Everything you will accept culturally, you will accept diplomatically, militarily. U.S. bases will be in there. You will subjugate your people to the U.S. empire, and if instructed, you will sacrifice your entire nation for the U.S. empire. Once you get to that point, then you're considered a democracy. Anything less than that is either not mentioned or an authoritarian, right? So what we're talking about after World War II is, that's what I'm talking about, an empire that wants to gobble up other countries. Now, prior to the fall of the Soviet Union, the U.S. had a little bit different rhetoric. It was communism versus, excuse me, capitalism. But even then, they didn't just say, this is our economic method of existing, right? This is our economic theory of capitalism. They still use words like freedom. If you're in a communist country, you're not free. You can't be free. But if you're in a capitalist country, then you're free, as if your economic policies somehow determined whether you was free or not. But it was just rhetoric. There's a great book out called How to Hide an Empire, I would recommend. But the bottom line is, you have to have rhetoric to hide you're an empire. You just can't come out and say, we want to rule the world, we want to run everything. You have to come up with other rhetoric, and it was beautiful. And the rhetoric is not for the rest of the world. The rhetoric was for the people in the empire, for the citizens, so that they will go along with what their government's saying, because there are a lot of citizens, most of them probably, that if they knew the truth, they would be aghast if they knew the truth about their empire, right? So we're communism versus capitalism. And then the Soviet Union falls, and now Biden comes in, and it is now, keep in mind, 2000 to 2020, what was it? Anti-terrorism. We're going after terrorism, right? And what was that? Yeah, okay. Think about this, the rhetoric of the empire. The issue of terrorism really was what? That was this. We have to go to the Middle East, because that's where all the oil is, and conquer all of the countries and subjugate them, right? Because what happened? And that's where Israel comes in. Israel is a fort. It is a military outpost masquerading as a nation. That's what it is. RFK Jr. even recently referred to Israel as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Alexander Haig referred to it as that. What is an aircraft carrier? What is an aircraft carrier? It is a vessel that's used to project U.S. military power, to use military coercion, to attack your enemies, adversaries, or those who wish to remain independent. So when RFK Jr., he lets you know who he is. Hey, man, we need that aircraft carrier there. And he even mentioned, because China's in the area, right? So he lets you know, hey, man, I see it through the eyes of imperialism. Even though he claims to be anti-imperialist, he ain't an anti-imperialist. If he says, hey, we got an unsinkable aircraft carrier named Israel, he really gets it. He really understands it. To pretend that he doesn't understand it is a fraud. So bottom line, so Israel's our unsinkable aircraft carrier. Okay, just something to throw in with this, a data point. There are those who may have followed Wesley Clark some years back, somewhere around when the Iraq War started, and Wesley Clark's famous story, and I think the video may even be up on YouTube, where where Wesley Clark says he went to the Pentagon and they said, we've got 7 countries we want to conquer in the next 5 years, whatever, right? We're going to conquer. And they ended up being like Syria, Sudan. It was like Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, and I think maybe Sudan, whatever the case may be. One of the North African countries. Okay, the Horn of Africa country, I guess. So, but whatever the case may be, if you think about it, what they were really saying, think about it: Iran, Iraq, Libya, all loaded with oil, right? Syria has oil and it's strategically placed right next to Israel. So what the U.S. empire was saying was, we're going to annex all of the Middle East, because if you control Syria, Libya, Iraq, and Iran, you got the Middle East. Who can say anything against you at that point? And might I add, you also have a stranglehold on the world's oil. So at some point, China starts to rise, and you just say to China, you got to do what we say. And China says, we don't want to. And you say, well, you'll get no oil. We own the Middle East. OPEC is ours. So the whole quote war on terror was a fraud. It was about annexing the Middle East. It was about the empire expanding. That's what the empire's been doing, and annexing the Middle East, because all the empires do is expand, right? And grab more resources. We're going to expand, and now we're going to have the choke point of all choke points. We're going to have the oil for the world. That's it. We rule the world. Once again, it was about what the empire wants to do is to rule the world. And we don't have to have all the choke points for shipping lanes if we got the oil. Do what we want. We shut off the oil. Do what you want, or we shut off oil to the market. We control the prices. We drive the prices up and down. We make all the money. The U.S. owns the Middle East, and they got it all. The thing that they didn't count on was the Muslims are a tough breed, and the Muslims are not intimidated. They're not afraid. They will fight. They will fight. And you ain't going to just subjugate the Muslims, and you're not going to just come in there and run over them and take all of their stuff. They will fight you. And the U.S. empire was not prepared for the fight that they were getting themselves into, and that fight continues today. So add this, and you say, well, how does that have to do with Ukraine and Taiwan? Okay, if you take into account that which is obvious now, that the European nations have no sovereignty, they have been conquered. The U.S. has conquered them all and has placed bases all throughout the conquered nations. One thing, what did Rome do? What do you do when you take a country? You put military bases all in. Why? For two reasons. Number one, you can use them. You expand outward. Every time you got a military, you got let's say you've got this is the center, right? Of your empire. You expand outward. But as you expand outward, you need military bases on the outer edges of your military, all around the outer edges of your empire. You need bases so you can continue to attack from there and expand out. So all of these bases was about expanding, attacking, acquiring new territory, taking over new countries, till eventually there are no countries to take over, because you got the oil, you got the choke points, you got the economic points. Boom, you got it all. You run the world. That's what an empire is ultimately going to eventually try to run the world. And there's the U.S. empire. Boom. So the empire is expanding. What's the Ukraine situation about? What is it about? You've heard this term. NATO, what? Expansion. It's about and what is NATO? Is NATO some kind of an organization, an alliance that works together to defend Europe? How's that working right now? Are they defending Germany? No, they attacked Germany. Why? They had to attack Germany because Germany became too economically powerful. Germany had some industry that had to go. They wanted Germany out of the way, so they attacked Germany. And they blew up their energy infrastructure. So it was right there that showed that the empire and that NATO was not about defending Europe from outside attacks. That all of those bases in Germany was not about defending Germany. It was about the occupation of Germany and having those bases in Germany all over the NATO to expand out to attack countries, Russia in this instance, that haven't been conquered yet. So Russia's got to be conquered. Why? Because they haven't been conquered yet. So now NATO expansion is U.S. empire expansion. There's no such thing as NATO. NATO is the U.S. empire. So let's think about this. So the U.S. is expanding towards Russia, and Russia's saying, "Cut it out. You better slack up, dude. Back off me. Back up off me." And the U.S. is saying, What did was it Stoltenberg said when Russia said, "Look, we need to talk. You're getting too close." And Stoltenberg said, Russia has no say. They have no veto. They have no nothing. In other words, we're the U.S. empire, dude. And this is what we do. And you don't get to say no to us. We are going to expand. We're going to come up to your borders. We're going to conquer you, wipe you out, and take your country. It's what we do. Resistance is futile. That's what Stoltenberg was saying. And the Russians were like, well, perhaps you should read the history of Russia's military engagements, and you'll understand that don't work so well with Russia. Historically, you ain't the first that's tried it. You probably won't be the last. But at some point, you will learn that this is where that whole U.S. empire expansion crap comes to a screeching halt. Before we get there, let's go back to 2011. The United States was like, hey, we're expanding. So, okay, We got Iraq. We're occupying Iraq. We're taking Syria. They start expanding into Syria. And what does Russia do? Excuse me. Russia makes a phone call. Iran, get the axis of resistance together, get the band together. We're going to bring some, we got a couple bases in Syria. We're going to bring some hardware in there. We will commence to whoop some butt. And we're going to stop this U.S. empire expansion. So the U.S. just can't go storming in there because it's not that easy to just go storming. The U.S. empire has to be slick about it. They have to be cunning about it. They have to come up with this excuse. We're going in there to help the poor people of Syria, to free them from their oil, but more likely from their terrible authoritarian leadership of Assad. And they'll be much better with ISIS in control. Apparently that was the plan. And the Russians weren't a part of that plan. And something very, very, very important happened then. Well, I'll say, you can even go before then, but something very important happened. And that is the Russians, another superpower, stepped up to the mic and beat back the U.S. empire. They stepped up to the plate. They stepped up to the mic on open mic night. And they said, hey, U.S. empire, not as what was the basketball player from Africa used to say when he blocked shots, no, 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 not in my house. That's what Russia did. They went to Syria and they said, no, 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 not in my house. And they stopped the U.S. empire along with Iran. Another reason the U.S. empire is furious with Iran and the Axis of Resistance and Hezbollah. Russia aligned themselves with Iran, the Axis of Resistance, Hezbollah, and they said, nah, you ain't sneaking in, clandestinely creeping in here and taking this. You're out of here. And they stopped the U.S. empire in its tracks, and the U.S. empire, realistically, for the first time, had a superpower come in and slam the brakes on them. Now, one could argue, again, I mean, we got to give the Muslim people, the Muslim way of thinking, of believing, the Muslim toughness. We got to give these people a lot of credit. We got to give their culture a lot of credit because they are not afraid. They ain't scared. I used to have a friend that say, don't be scared. They ain't scared, right? When the U.S. went into Iraq, right? And they're like, all right, we're going to fix you guys. We're going to go in here. We're going to take Iraq, and you guys are just going to fall down at our feet and say thank you. And the Muslims in Iraq and the Muslims in the region all came together and said, yeah, not that easy, pal. You can stay here, but you're going to get some heat. And there was years and years of insurgency, of fighting back, of roadside bombs, of the U.S. was losing troops in Iraq until such time as the U.S. had to use most of their stuff out of Iraq. They still have a few bases, but they kind of got ran out of Iraq. So in the same way that the Russians, a superpower, came in and put the brakes on in Syria, for the most part, the Iraqis, not completely successful, but they were able to smack the crap out of the U.S. empire and make their lives miserable and let them know, yeah, you can stay here, but it ain't going to be a happy time. So they fought back valiantly against the empire, and they inflicted pain on the empire. So that was an interesting time. You could even go back to 9/11 when bin Laden et al. Attacked the U.S. But we don't know what's going on with that. There's a lot going on. There are people that have a lot of suspicions about 9/11. So I'm not even going to get into that. I'll get into the things that we know a little bit more about. So you've got that. You've got the Iraqis pushing back. You have, I mean, you could go back to the Vietnam War. You know, the U.S. attacked, but the U.S. tends to lose wars. But at any rate, but I'm just going into the last decade or so. Okay, so the NATO, 2000, and then the U.S. empire is pissed off, and you may not know this, a little bit of history. One of the things that happened with the Syrian conflict was this. A lot of people might not know this. The neocons were pushing Obama to attack Syria over, so-called weapons of mass destruction, poison gas. And there was, I forgot where the meeting was, but Putin says to Obama, look, tell you what, you don't want to attack Syria. I don't want you to attack Syria. I can get you out of this. I can get your chestnuts out of the fire, as Ray McGovern likes to say. Here's what I'll do. You guys got a ship that can get rid of this gas. I'll talk to Assad. We'll make a deal. He'll give you the gas, all the poisonous gas and stuff that he has. He gives it to you. You destroy this on the ship. No fuss, no muss. And the neocons can't push you into war. And Obama's like, really? You can do that? Putin's like, not a problem. So Putin does that. Gets the deal. Obama says yes, sends the ship, boom, and Obama's chestnuts are out of the fire. The neocons are furious, right? Putin then writes an article, an op-ed that goes in the New York Times, and he basically says, this Obama guy, I might be able to work with him. I might be able to deal with this guy, right? Okay. And behind Obama's back, a lot of people don't know this, within months after that, trouble springs up in Ukraine. It is my belief and the belief of a lot of people that the neocons did their dirt in Ukraine behind Obama's back. Let's not forget, the neocons were furious at Obama because after they overthrew the government of Ukraine, they said, all right, now we're going to arm Ukraine to the teeth. And Obama said, I ain't doing it. And I'm no fan of Obama, but this is what happened. Obama said, not happening. And they said, why? He said, number one, you can look this up. Number one, Vladimir Putin will always have escalatory dominance in the region. That was his term. Number two, I'm afraid that, because this will always be, very important. It will always be, critical. I'm just not using the same terms. I can't remember the exact terms right now, but basically what he said is this: Ukraine will be a very, very important. It'll be critical to Russia's security, but it'll never be critical like that to ours. So, I ain't supporting them, Ukraine. I'm not arming Ukraine to the teeth, not sending them weapons. I'm not doing any of that. Obama wouldn't do it. Now, eventually, who started doing it? Trump started doing it, but Obama wasn't going to do it because he said, hey, this thing will go bad in a hurry. To Obama's credit, no friend of Obama, no supporter of Obama, but I'm just saying, you got to give the devil his due, right? Okay. So, as the empire continued to expand, right? They're going to do what? They're going to expand up to Russia's border. And now it's critical. Russia, it has said no. Russia says, I'm not going to be, one of your lackeys. I'll be, on your team. I'll be a member of NATO, whatever, but I'm going to be independent and we're going to look out for our own security needs, our own economic needs. We have our own culture. We have our own way of doing things. And this is what we're going to do. But we'd be happy to work with you on all kind of projects and be friends. Well, the U.S. empire is like, now you don't understand how an empire works. The answer is no. So what we're going to do is we're going to overthrow you, take your country and steal all your stuff because it's just what we do. We're an empire. No hard feelings, right? Putin's like, yeah, okay, whatever. So they start building up in Ukraine, and Putin's like, look, you keep building in Ukraine and things are going to go bad for you, right? Okay, we cannot let you NATO into Ukraine. Now, the plan for the neocons were, no, we're not going to let you, I can't let Ukraine into NATO. The plan for the neocons were, sure, we're not going to put Ukraine in NATO, but we'll put NATO in Ukraine. So we'll build Ukraine up. And they're building military, and finally, at some point, and might I add, and what did they exploit? They exploited one group who is Western Ukrainians, the neo-Nazis, etc., who despise on a racial hatred the Russians and everybody that's dear to them, the people in Donbass, in the same way that the Israelis despise with a racial hatred the Palestinians. Because if you're an empire, that's what you like. If you're an empire, you want to find people in an area that's destabilized, that hate some other group, and you can use that hatred of another group to destabilize that region, that nation, and you can use that hatred to get those people to do things that they wouldn't normally do that's detrimental to them. You can even say to the Ukrainian people, hey, there's a giant superpower next to you with nukes and a powerful army that pretty much doesn't get defeated very much. And how'd you like to fight them? And the Ukrainians are so, racked with hatred for Russia. And they're like, yeah, we get to kill some Russians. And the neocons are like, yeah, you get to kill some Russians. Sure, pal. We'll arm you. Go ahead and we'll weaken the Russians with using, throwing your we'll weaken the Russians. We're going to throw Ukrainian meat at them until they get tired of blowing it to smithereens. Oh, by the way, you're the Ukrainian meat. I mean, literally now they've run out of, military age males. and they're drafting women. They're drafting people who are mentally ill. They're literally now, Ukraine says, we will draft you if you have an amputation. They don't care. They just need some meat to send to the front lines. Can you see that? We got a battalion here. What do you have? Well, we got some 14-year-old girls. We got some guys fresh out of the sanitarium. They're kind of mumbling, walking around in circles, talking to themselves, completely, totally schizophrenic. They don't even know where they are. We can't really give them a gun. You can't trust them with that. And we got some amputees and blind guys. Can you imagine? I mean, you're going to have people like going to the front lines with service dogs, CNI dogs. Hey, follow that dog towards the enemy. Okay, let's go there. Sparky, off they go towards the enemy. That's where Ukraine is. And if you're an empire, it's just what you do. Those people have to be sacrificed. This is expansion of the empire, right? So the Russians are not in Ukraine to fight the Ukrainians. They're stopping the empire of expansion. And the empire has expanded into Ukraine. See, that's very interesting what the Russians are doing here. What's really going on here? The U.S. empire has expanded into Ukraine all the way up to the Russian border. And the Russians have said, don't do that, which means the empire now has to do it because the world's looking on and the empire's like, we do anything we want, anywhere we want. That's called the rules-based international order. Nobody can stop us. And the Russians say, don't take over Ukraine. Well, now they got to demonstrate to the world that they're in charge and nobody tells them what to do. So now what are the Russians doing? The empire has expanded up to their border and now it will contract. The empire will do something the empire can't ever let anybody see it contract, can't let it get smaller, right? It tried to take Vietnam, it lost Vietnam, but it never really owned it. Never really had Vietnam. It had half of Vietnam mostly and never really had North Vietnam. So you can't lose what you never had, as Earth, Wind, and Fire says, right? But they took Ukraine. They put their puppets in Ukraine. They built 40 some odd places to to handle poisonous, horrific diseases. And they built so-called biological research labs, right? They took Ukraine. They put their government in it. They stole the resources. They did everything. Ukraine is now theirs. They now own Ukraine. They took Ukraine. I was told by someone who I think a lot of, that Tony Blinken said to the Russians, Ukraine is ours now. So bottom line, you didn't want us to, but we expanded up to your border. So what Russia is doing now is it's fighting the United States and it's kicking them off its border, which means the U.S. will contract. The U.S. empire will contract. It took Ukraine and Russia's taking it back. And that puts the U.S. empire in an untenable position. How are you an empire over the world? Rules-based international order, U.S.-led world order, blah, 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 blah. If you take Ukraine and the Russians kick your ass right out, get out, and stay out. And there's nothing they can do at this point to stop the Russians from kicking them out, because their plan was, we're going to take Russia apart with economic sanctions. That fell apart. We're going to create a color revolutions and Putin will be gone, blah, blah, that gone. All of their plans are gone. They don't have a backup. And when they were thinking about their backup, boom, Middle East flares up. So Ukraine really is about the U.S. contracting. I've often said about the U.S. empire being forced to contract because Russia is going to liberate Ukraine, in reality, from U.S. occupation and control. And if you see what happened to Ukraine, you don't want to be occupied and controlled. Look at Germany. It ain't going to work out well for you if you're occupied and controlled by the U.S. empire, because they will use you to death. They will sacrifice you and your people and your economy, etc. And if you look at what's happening, in Ukraine, they will steal all your stuff. They're trying to do Ukraine. They're trying to go in there to BlackRock's, trying to buy everything. What they want to figure is whatever is left of Ukraine when the war is over, they want U.S. corporations to own it all. Nothing left for Ukraine. So they're expanded. Now, what happened? One of the things, when they realized at some point they realized, oh crap, we're going to lose Ukraine. So what did they do? We got to take Sweden and Finland. They had to. Why? Because we're contracting, and we don't want to contract. So we're going to have to go grab some other countries. So let's grab some other countries, and we'll still be going right up to Russia's border. But the problem they have is that there's two things about an empire. There is, number one, the actual territory that it controls, but there's the mindset that it controls. There is the respect that it gets, albeit grudgingly, for being able to militarily, economically coerce people to do what they want. So the fact is, everybody needs to know that the U.S. can take any country it wants, anytime it wants, and nobody can stop it. And what happens? They've gone up to Ukraine, and Russia says, time out, get out of Ukraine, or we'll kick you out. The U.S. says, you can't possibly do that. You know how much money we have? We can continue to feed money into Ukraine until the cows come home. And the Russians say, well, you may feed money into it, but we're going to try artillery shells. And we'll see in the end which wins this war, money or artillery rounds. My bet is always going to be on artillery rounds in a war, always. So it was U.S. capital. That's why all the discussion is more money for Ukraine. Think about it. It was capital. It was a country that says we have the world's reserve and we can print more anytime we want. Nobody can stop that. We got unlimited money, which means we can do anything we want because we got unlimited money, because we can always print more. Right? But at some point, it's like this. If we're on a desert island, right, and you got a briefcase of $1 million and our plane has crashed and we're sitting there, and the radio calls in and says, we got a ship, but it's going to take 4 days to get there. And in 4 days, the ship will come get you off the island. Sorry, you got to stay there until that happens, right? You got a bag of $1 million in it, and I got 2 coconuts. And inside they got the coconut juice and everything. And we sit down, calculate the calories. And I say, listen, if we share these coconuts, we can make it. We got enough calories to easily exist for 5 days, 4 days. Well, 5 days. They said they'll be here in 4. We have an extra. All we got to do is build a little shelter to get out from under the sun, kind of chill out a little bit, maybe exercise a little, stay cool, keep ourselves together. These 2 coconuts. But I'll tell you what I need you to do. What's that? You got $1 million in that suitcase. Yeah, you give me half of it. I'll give you 1 coconut. You'll have a coconut. I'll have a coconut. We can survive. And the guy's like, nah, I want to keep my money. Buy the coconut, dude. You're going to die without it. Ultimately, it comes down to money is a representation of things in the real world. Money is a potential to buy things in the real world. See, that's what Russia has proven, that economically, when it comes down to it, the U.S. is like, we've got unlimited capital. And Russia has proven that unlimited capital that you can print is a potential to buy artillery shells. So if Ukraine needs 1 million artillery shells, you got the potential to buy 2 million for them. If we need 1 million artillery shells, we can make 1 million artillery shells. Who's better off? The person that has the money to potentially purchase 1 million artillery shells, but they got no where to buy them from, or the person that can make 1 million artillery shells? So one of the things that have happened here in this U.S. empire attempting to expand is that it has been revealed the truth of the U.S. empire. Its foundation now is in what? It's in some weird economic theory that says we can make financial we can print money, and we can make up derivatives and asset-backed securities, and all of that will give us an excuse to print more money, and then we can use that money potential for anything we want. But in reality, that money potential at some point has to be converted into the hard things that you need for war if you go to war. If me and you are going to fight and you got a sword and I got $1 million, I need to buy. If one guy's got a sword, I better spend it all on that sword, because I'm dead without it. The money's nothing but a potential, right? So that's a long way of saying Russia is old school. China's old school. They make things. They don't care about the potential to make things. They actually want the things. So an economy that works based on the money, the theoretical potential to buy things, was expanding, and they ran into a country that actually makes things, and the theoretical potential is not going to win against, again, an artillery round. You can sit here and you can say, I got $10 billion worth of stock. I got $1 billion worth of cryptocurrency. I got $5 billion in real estate. And that guy fires an artillery round. That artillery is going to rip you to pieces. All that potential ain't going to save you. So the U.S. went into Ukraine to fight Russia with with financial potential, and they ain't going to win. So now here's the bottom line. So what happens? The empire will contract. And that's a problem for the empire. We are seeing the end of the empire. Once an empire starts being forced to contract, it won't stop. It's trying to swell out. I got too big for its britches. It's going to start going back in, and it ain't going to stop. Look, part of the empire is what? The Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine basically, in theory, says no country in the Western Hemisphere can have a military alliance with someone outside of the Western Hemisphere. The United States says that we control you all, and we will use violence and blah, 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 and economic coercion to stop you. So that's part of the U.S. saying, and the U.S. has bases all over Latin America. So we have conquered Latin America. We can use economic coercion. We can use military coercion to maintain that dominance. Now what's going on? China's all over Latin America. How about this? Africa, China's all over there. Russia's all over there. Voluntarily, they're doing business with them. They're pushing back against the U.S. But not militarily yet, but they will. There will come a time when you'll see countries in South America say, get the hell out or else. That's coming. It's just a matter of time. Once they start seeing other people do it, they'll wake up and they'll say, we want your bases out. And the U.S. is going to say, we're not going to leave. You can't force us out. And they'll go from there. But I digress. Let me get back to Taiwan. So we've got Ukraine. Russia says, we get out or we'll throw you out. The U.S. says no. Russia's in the process of throwing them out. The U.S. empire is going to have to contract. It's trying to expand in Finland and Sweden and all, trying to make up for it. But you can't make up for somebody forcing you to contract if you're an empire. Just because you're able to take Finland and Sweden don't mean nothing. The deal has been done. I can say I'm the bully around school. I'm going to walk around school. I'm taking your lunch money. And I walk up to somebody and say, I'm taking your lunch money. The guy says, I ain't giving it to you. You say, you will give me your lunch money or I'll treat you like I treated the rest of the kids. And the guy says, you have to give it a shot because you ain't get my lunch money. You grab the kid and right in the snoot. Your blood runs down your nose. You cry and you run in the bathroom and you say to the teacher, he punched me in the nose. Your air of invincibility is gone. Now, when you start trying to take people's lunch money, they're going to say, don't make me call Billy on you, bruh. Oh, Billy tightened that nose up yesterday, so don't make me call. That's what they're going to say. Hey, guess what? The U.S. is going to say to somebody, hey, we're going to take whatever. They're going to go, don't make me call Vladimir Putin on you. You know what happened last time. You don't want to see him again. Right? Billy punched you in the nose. That's what kids, I've seen it when I was a kid. You know, they're going to tease you. Billy punched you in the nose. You went home with your nose bleeding. And the next day, give me your lunch money. Kids going to say, you want me to call Billy? You taking lunch money again? You want me to call Billy? You come on over here and have a chat with you? You don't want to get that nose. You don't get that wig pushed back, do you? You best walk. Keep on stepping, bro. Keep on. Once you got your wig pushed back one time by Billy on the playground, you just got to keep on stepping from then on. The air of invincibility is done. And now that they don't win in Ukraine and we're sending Abrams tanks, Leopard tanks, now F-16, we're sending this, and everything they sent in there gets smashed to pieces. And the Russians just keep coming. And we send some more, and the Russians blow that up. Keep it coming. It's like the Russians are sitting there saying, we really want to prove that we can beat all of your stuff. So please, we got a list of all of the finest military hardware you have. We got 25 things here. You've only sent 23 of them in. We got 2 more things that we have blown to hell. So could you send them into Ukraine again? Because we got to make it clear to the world that everything you got, we can neutralize. That's kind of what it comes across like sometimes. Okay. So now the U.S. has had all of their military hardware, a lot of it neutralized. Now the Russians are flying around with Kinzhal missiles in the Black Sea saying, yeah, you think those carriers are invincible too? We got something for them. So do what you got to do. But if things go bad, you're losing get carriers. No matter what, if things go bad, you are losing carriers. Is that what you want to do? Is that the move next? Your decision. Let your conscience be your guide. That's kind of where the Ruskies are. When they don't want to do it, but if pushed far enough, they'll let loose some of those Kinzhal missiles if pushed far enough. They don't want to. And I fear quite frankly, that if the Russians ever got to a point where they had to sink aircraft carriers, they probably sink them all. Why not? If you're going to sink one, you might as well sink them all. Yeah, I mean, let's face it. The Russians have ships, subs all over the place. Who knows where their subs are, right? And they probably, to some extent, they probably have subs tailing our fleets. You know, they probably got some sails hunting those fleets, and probably as those what do you call it? Carrier groups sit out in the Mediterranean, wherever the hell in the area, I will guarantee you there's some Russian subs sitting there saying, if things go bad, those MiG-31s in the Black Sea are going to send some Kinzhals from that direction, and you're going to get some other stuff coming from this direction. So this is a powerful enough country to inflict some nasty pain on the U.S. in a hurry. So that's where the U.S. is now. The military technology has caught up with the U.S. to a point where a peer competitor is actually superior to you in missile technology, far superior to you in missile technology, far superior with the Kinzhals and all of the various several different types of hypersonic missiles that the Russians have, and the U.S. can't stop any of them. So at any rate, so I digress. So that's it with Ukraine, but let's go to Taiwan. What's happening with Taiwan? Same kind of thing. The U.S. has said we expanded, the empire expanded up to the border of Russia, and Russia's saying we're going to kick you back. Meanwhile, the U.S. is saying simultaneously we're going to expand up to the border of China. And it's, oh yes, Taiwan wants to be free and independent. They don't want Taiwan. Do you think the U.S. wants any country to be free and independent? No. What the U.S. wants is bases in Taiwan. That's what they want. They ultimately, that Taiwan is close to China. They can't intimidate China. They can't control the Taiwan Straits and the South China Sea, you know, where all this stuff goes through. So they're like, look, we got to A, control the Middle East, and B, everything's going through here, the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. We need to control these. So this is about the U.S. empire saying we can come all the way up to the border of China. We'll expand up there. That's the U.S. saying we're going to become friends now with the Philippines and all these other countries in Asia. What are they trying to do? They're trying to expand into the Pacific, come right up to the border of China so that they can, quote, confront China. In other words, we want to take China. We want to put China down and we want to control it. That's what the U.S. empire does. And the Chinese are not going to let that happen. They'll go to war over Taiwan in a minute if they have to. If they have to. But if they don't, they're patient. They're patient. U.S. empire is facing some patient adversaries, and they're patient because they've been around for thousands of years. If you've been around for thousands of years, you understand the issue of time, and you understand the issue of empires, and that empires all eventually, sooner or later, they expand and then they contract. And when they contract in a hurry. Now let's go to the Middle East. So the U.S. now is in the Middle East, and remember, it planned to expand everywhere in the Middle East, right? 7 countries. In pretty much all of the Middle East, it's going to take, right? Once you take all of the main countries, you got everybody else has to do what you have to say, right? So they start off, they do Iraq, Libya, what have you. We're going to take Syria, boom, that doesn't happen. So now there's a problem. And the problem is the U.S.'s main military base, Israel, as would expected to be the case, is based on how they created Israel and what the ideology is in Israel, as would expect to be the case, it got out of hand. It was so barbaric in the way that it treated the indigenous people in this colonialist colony, is what I think it is. It was so barbaric that the people became angry and outraged. And in the same way that the Iraqi surgeons fought back, in the same way that, the Muslim community, they ain't going to be intimidated ever. They're going to fight your ass. You go in there, you want to fight, they're going to fight. It's like, I've told people on this channel many times about the story of my buddy who, and I'll make it brief because a lot of people probably heard this story again before, but it was a buddy of mine, and he's up in Philadelphia, and he's working on a site, and there was a mafia-owned company that owned the construction site, huge construction site, and the people who ran this particular business would come down to the construction sites. There was like 4 or 5 young guys, and they would intimidate the workers and they would boss them around and look tough. And he got in a bit, and this guy ain't that kind of person. And he got in a little bit of a argument with one of the guys who was intimidating people and things like that. And he ain't that kind. And so all the other guys' buddies came up and they kind of surrounded them with the 5 guys. And they're like, oh, all right, calm down. And his answer was, come on, I'll fight all 5 of you right now. And he meant it. He was pissed. And once he got pissed, there was no bargaining with him. He was ready to fight off. He didn't care if he got his ass kicked. He was going to fight him because he wasn't going to back down. It was like, I'm going to fight you, but I ain't going to back down. Right. And instead, I've told the story. Instead, they started laughing and they said, man, we like you. You're good people. And took him out drinking. They became best buddies with him. Why? Yeah, we're mafia guys. But they respected a guy who didn't care if he got his butt kicked, but he was going to fight. And that's the kind of person, if you're walking down the street and you got, who do you want with you? You want the guy that's going to run and leave you there, or the guy that says, hey, man, there's 3, 4, 5 guys are going to jump us and they got us surrounded. Let's go. You know what I mean? Let's go. They may win. Oh, they may win, but they ain't going home happy. He's going to bite and he's going to scratch and he's going to punch and he's going to do anything. He's going to throw dirt in their eyes. He's going to grab a bottle and cut them with anything he can do. He's going to do, because he ain't going down without a fight. Even if he dies, he's taking somebody with him, right? That's the Muslim way. They ain't going down without a fight. So the Palestinian people were like, yeah, within the context of the Palestinian community, there's that Muslim fighting spirit. And at some point, they planned and got together. And of course, in the same way that the hubris of an empire always works, that hubris of an empire goes down to its vassals. So the Israeli government, are you kidding me? We're looking at every inch of Gaza. They'll never be able to do anything. We've got the Mossad. We've got eyes in the sky. We've got planes. We've got everything. They have no chance against us. Resistance is futile, right? And of course, Hamas's position was probably, yeah, we may not have a chance, but we're going to fight anyway. We may lose. We're going to fight anyway. Come on, let's dance. We're not saying we're going to win, but we're going to fight. They look, you got to understand about people like that. If you study self-defense, you got to understand, if you're under self-defense, oftentimes my instructor, Vimy Grayson, and Vimy would say, somebody pulls a knife and they're attacking with a knife. Oh, the same thing. Run if you can. Always run. Always try to get away. But if you're going to have to fight, you might not get out alive. But as he says, go down like a soldier. You know what I mean? Hey, there ain't nothing for me to do. But I ain't going out balled up in a corner in a fetal position, sucking my thumb, begging you not to hit me anymore. I want you to say, we killed that guy, but geez, man, he beat the hell out of us first. We lost 2 guys. I got broken hands. Got knee in the groin, bitten to the blood. Oh my God, he's a madman. The guy's a madman. Yeah, we finished him off, but it was costly, right? And why do you fight? You fight because you're a badass. You fight because you're tough. You don't fight because to win. You're not fighting to win. You fight because you're a fighter. It's like activism. But that's why a lot of people don't understand the Muslim community. I do. I have a lot of friends who are Muslim and understand this and understand that mentality. It's like activism. You don't do activism to have success. You do activism because you're an activist and it's just what you do. And because whatever you're working towards, you may long be dead and it may happen or may never happen. But while you're alive, you're going to fight for it. That's the Muslim mentality. We ain't going to fight you because we're going to defeat you or drive you out. I may die and my son will fight you. He'll die, my grandson. But we're going to fight you because it's what we do. You come after us, we're going to start throwing punches and see what happens. Simple as that. You come after us, we're going to throw punches and see what happens. So I understand the concept of Hamas. It wasn't like, well, didn't they know what a foolish thing to do? And they're fighting against Israel. Now that people are going to, I understand, not saying I'm opposed to it, not saying I support it. I'm just doing a critique here. I'm saying what I understand is fighters fight. That's what they do. There's an injustice. Hey, you came after my people and we've been subjected to injustice. We're going to fight you. Well, you won't win. I didn't say we're going to win. I said we're going to fight you. We're going to fight you with everything we got. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But we will for sure fight. That's the Palestinians, Hamas. They may not win, they may win, but damn sure they're going to fight. And what do you think, they're going to stop fighting if Israel goes into Palestine and kills people there and does all kind of terrible things? There's going to be some people when they come out still waiting to fight them. They ain't going away. The Muslim community, the Muslim world ain't going away. And if they kill every Palestinian, there's a whole lot more Muslims that's going to say, oh, we got to get our revenge now. Oh, well, you're going to pay now, you son of a bitch. You're going to get it now. So what good does it do? As they've said, you've heard this saying, we don't die, we multiply. They're going to keep fighting. Now, why do I say all that? All that is critical because I believe, I will argue that the Muslim spirit is critical, is a critical factor in the world when it comes to stopping the U.S. empire from its evil doings, because I think it's evil to try to rule the world and take everybody's stuff and subjugate everybody. That's an evil thing to do. And I think the Muslim spirit of fighting is important. And I think that what we've seen here is Hamas, in taking this action, again, I believe in international law, and I believe Hamas had a right to attack military targets. Any civilians that were killed in this conflict by Hamas, I oppose that. It's a violation of international law. I'll say that right now. That being said, now look what the Israelis are doing. You know, if they killed 250 civilians, then you got to say that's wrong. And you killed 10,000 now? And you're going to say they're the bad guys? I'm sorry. That ain't the way it works. You can't do that. You can say, hey, you killed, you did something that's wrong. You can make that argument. In light of the fact that they're being occupied, I think there are some mitigating factors that have to be brought into account. Not saying I support or don't support anything, but I think that there's a discussion to be had about mitigating factors when you have an occupying power that's oppressing an occupied people. You got to have that discussion if you're going to be intellectually honest and fair about this thing. But that being said, the response of the Israelis was, you know, we're going to kill, basically ethnic cleansing and genocidal acts. So now the U.S. And let me say this. Let me add this. I don't think that the loss that the Israeli military took has been adequately reported on and exposed. I really don't. I think they got hit far worse than they will admit. Far worse. I think that, you know, they lost a lot of their military leadership. Done, killed, captured, a lot. Generals, numbers of, and their entire staffs wiped out. They went to these like brigade headquarters. Apparently there was like these headquarters that were in charge of the entire Gaza and all of these regions. They all got took out. They went in there and caught them 5:30 in the morning. They caught these people sleep with their pants down. They wiped a lot of them out. Israel lost a lot more. At some point, I think the world will know Israel took a much worse beating than the world knows. And here's evidence of it. What's the first thing the U.S. did? They sent in a bunch of generals to help direct things. Why? Because Israel lost the people that would have been directing things. So what happened? Israel, a bunch of guys that only have ingenuity and small arms, knocked the crap out of the Israeli military on a morning. Knocked the crap. I think it was a Saturday morning or something. Knocked the crap out of the U.S. Israeli military. The U.S. I've heard now that there's 5,000 U.S. special forces in Israel fighting for Israel. I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it's clear the IDF now, they've brought in all of these, the weekend warriors, as they say, right? Those people are not up. They are not in any way, shape, or form prepared or trained to go into the kind of fighting that they need to go into to go up against Hamas in the rubble. And so they'd be just obliterated. So the U.S. is going in with special forces, and my understanding is they're taking some heavy losses. Americans have no idea what kind of losses that the U.S. military is taking, but I think they're taking some losses. You go in that rubble, a whole lot of people ain't coming out. That's all I got to say about that. But you ask yourself, what's going on here? The U.S. is not, think about this. The U.S. is not only saying we're going to give you money, unlimited money, Israel. They're literally sending in the fighters. They're literally sending in the generals. They're directing this military campaign think about this, in the same way that the U.S. is literally directing the military campaign in Ukraine. They're directing it top to bottom. They're like, oh yeah, the Ukrainians screwed up because they won't listen to us. You're a fool if you believe that. You're a fool if you believe that the U.S. military that's paying every bill, every note, every politician in Ukraine is paid for. Every street sweeper, everything is paid for by the U.S. empire. You're a fool if you think that the U.S. is paying for everything they got and not running that war. And it top to bottom, every single thing that happens, the U.S. is running it. And now what happened? And right, I add, if you're fighting a war, probably don't want the U.S. military running it based on their, I'm just saying, based on their historical record. You try something different. But look at Israel. The U.S. is running it. Why? Because they are concerned that they're going to be forced to contract, and their concern is valid because there ain't no way out of this one. So now the U.S. is literally fighting this thing. And they brought all of these aircraft carriers in. They brought all of this stuff in. Now people are saying it's because they want to fight Iran. What I think is this. It is about Israel. It's about stopping, taking out Hamas, stopping the threats to Israel, etc. Because the U.S. realizes something. Now, Israel is a power projection point. It is, in fact, their major. It's not an unsinkable aircraft carrier. It's the major unsinkable hub of military power projection and intelligence projection for the U.S. in Africa and West Asia, right? And then all throughout the Middle East, West Asia, Africa, this is the power projecting point. And the U.S. has brought in all of these resources and armadas, and not so much for Iran or anybody else. It is mainly for this reason. We can't lose that power projection point. Devastating for the U.S. They don't give a crap about the Israelis. They don't want to lose that power projection point. They lose that, the whole Middle East is gone. And might I add, they realize something. The Middle Eastern people now are like down with China and Russia. They're like, Russia, China, they're our friends. You ain't. If they lose, diplomatically, they've already lost the entire Middle East and Africa. Diplomatically, rhetorically, culturally, every way they've lost it, right? Middle East people, Africans, those older countries, they ain't much on the woke ideology. Traditional, more conservative societies ain't buying the woke ideology, ain't happening. So you already lost them culturally. Diplomatically, the Russians and Chinese are all over Africa and the Middle East, West Asia. So you've already lost them diplomatically. And militarily now, in every way, in shape, form, they're afraid they'll lose that too. And they're right. Because to lose, they contract completely. They lose the whole Middle East if they lose Israel. But think about this. When I say lose Israel, I don't mean that Israel gets wiped out and there's no Israel. What I mean is, and they use the word deterrence, they really mean domination. We need a deterrence in this region. We're going to deter people from doing this or that. What they mean is domination. They use Israel as a military power projection point to dominate the region, right? If Israel's there, and Israel makes peace with the Palestinians, and Israel's no longer bombing Syria, attacking their neighbors, threatening anybody, threatening people, right? Then it's not a power projection point anymore. It's just a country that's living in peace with its neighbors, and they don't have the chaos. They don't have the constant tension and friction they need, so that they can say to Israel, "All right, we don't like Syria, go bomb them." and Israel go bomb Syria. People go, why is Israel constantly bombing Syria? They bombed Damascus airport, they bombed this, they bombed that. Why do they keep doing that? They do it because their masters told them to do that, because that's what their masters want them to do. What do you think when Israel bombed the Iraq? What was it? Iraq had a nuclear program. Whether it was, they claimed that it wasn't military. And the Israelis went and bombed it. You think that was the Israelis? They did what their masters told them to do. They wouldn't bomb it unless they were told. People are like, Israel's out of control. They do whatever they want to, regardless of what the U.S. wants. Yeah, you believe that if you want to. It ain't true. They are allowed some extra leeway. Yeah, they attacked the Liberty because they knew they could get away with it, things like that. But over and all, don't fool yourself. Israel is a power projection point for the U.S. That is their usefulness to the U.S. And the other thing is this is existential to Israel, because Israel has treated the Palestinians so bad. They've been so hubristic. They've been so arrogant. They've been so mean to their neighbors. They've attacked their neighbors that they're like, man, if we ever get to a point where we can't militarily dominate our neighbors, they may want to treat us like we treated them. When they're wrong. Their neighbors don't really want to do them like that. Their neighbors just want to live in peace. But there's some level of projection. But the U.S. is looking at this saying, whatever we have to do, it doesn't matter. We can't lose Israel as a power projection point. The problem is they've already lost Israel as a power projection point. They've lost the Middle East. This thing, in the same way that the Ukraine conflict is over, they've lost that. It's done. It's done. Ukrainians are, the Russians are, again, slowly and patiently making their move. Because they know. Now you think you're going to be able to arm Ukraine and Israel, and you ain't going to arm Ukraine. You're only going to arm Israel. Right now, the U.S. empire has to look at Ukraine and Israel. And what do they say? People are like, oh, Israel first. But there's a reason for it. If they got to make a choice, Ukraine was an attempt to expand into Russia's sphere of influence and then take Russia. So if they can't expand, if they lose, if they contract a little bit, as I said, you can't lose what you never had. They never really had it. They had a grip on it, but the grip on Ukraine was always tenuous until they got this war and proved to Russia that Russia can't take Ukraine and take Russia out with Ukraine. Their grip on Ukraine was tenuous. As long as the Russians were sitting over there looking at them out of the corner of their eyes, their grip on Ukraine was always tenuous. They owned Israel. That's theirs. They've got it. They've got their claws sunk into it, and nobody can get it from them. So if they got to make a choice of losing something that they were in the process of trying to expand, but they had a tenuous grip on it, or losing something that is theirs, that they own, they occupy, and they can use that to go after. They can use that to use the Mossad's intelligence. They can use that to attack all over the Middle East and do all kind of nefarious and clandestine deeds in Africa and everywhere else. They ain't losing that. They got to make a choice. And now, in a brilliant way, the resistance forces are putting them in creating a conundrum, right? Creating a point where a paradox, creating where you got to do one thing or the other, and either way you lose. So now, as I've said, I'm an advocate for this when it comes to international policy. Strategic patience. And look at the Russians. Everybody's been screaming, the Russians should attack. The Russians should do a bit. When are they going to attack? And the Russians are just strategically patient, watching. And think about it. The Russians have waited to a point where another conflict came up and Ukraine's going to fall apart right in front of them and drop right in their hands, because they're patient enough to know we don't have to do a big offensive. And they're doing some offensives right now. But it ain't the kind of big arrow offensive that everybody thought. It's poo. We're going to keep punching at you. Body punch, body punch, body punch. We're going to take, and time is going to defeat you. Our guys are going to keep the pressure on, and time is going to defeat you. So the Russians have laid low, and now Ukraine's about to fall into their lap because the U.S. empire was put into a position where it has to make a choice. We're trying to expand with Ukraine. We got a tenuous grip on it. Do we keep that or lose it? Or do we lose? Do we focus all of our energy on something that we have to project power into the region? Ukraine's done. Forget it. That's out of the picture. So now they're actually literally in Ukraine fighting Hamas. Hamas did a gut punch, not just on Israel, but the U.S. empire itself. And now Now, again, strategic patience. What are the resistance forces doing in Iraq and Syria? They're hitting the U.S. bases every day. Are they launching some huge giant attack where they come to the fences with thousands of people and they just try to take one of those bases? Nope. Nope, 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 nope. What are they doing? Every day they're punching. Some drones are coming in. Some missiles are coming in. Every day, something's coming into your base. You ain't never going to sleep and be. Every night when you go to bed, you better sleep with one eye open because we're going to continue to punch at you, to nickel and dime you, to nick you. You got to be afraid. One day will one of those drones hit a barracks where there's 100 guys? One of those missiles find its way to a barracks where there's 100 guys and we'll have massive losses? Now the U.S. is bombing Syria. Good. The resistance is like that. Good. We're making you defend Syria. Now you have to defend Iraq. Where else you got bases, right? We're going to make you defend all over the place, everywhere. And might I add, strategic patience. I don't see Iran coming into it anytime soon because what is it that the U.S. and Israel can't stand? I've talked about it in my last video. A long-term conflict, a long simmering conflict where they're just defending their bases. They're having trouble resupplying their bases and they got to really work hard. They got to spend a lot of money and time and effort to maintain those bases in the Middle East. And that's never going to change now. It's over. The idea that the U.S. could have bases in Iraq and Syria and wherever, and they could be unaccosted, them days is over. As long as those bases are there, they're going to be taking body shots every day. And sooner or later, one of those missiles fired into those bases is going to hit a barracks. And when it does, a whole bunch of Americans will die. And then there'll be either greater questions at home when the body bags start coming home. But that's going to happen. But even that ain't going to stop it. The Muslim resistance is going to continue to punch away. I don't think that Iran's going to come in some big war and attack. Why? They don't need to. They don't need to. They'll take their time. Can Israel fight a long war when I think your number 2 industry is tourism? How long can Israel continue to do this with all of their reserves called up and nobody to work in the stores and to work in the factories and to work anywhere with nobody to coming in for tourism because you're at constant war? How long can Israel do that? And let me add this. Even when this is technically over, let's say it was over tomorrow, Israel can't sleep at night. Every night they go to bed and they're like, are they going to hit us again? Are they going to break through the wall? Or are they going to attack us again? The people in the kibbutzes and all that. I mean, terrible. I hate to see civilians killed. I oppose that, right? Violation of international law. But if you're in a kibbutz or whatever the hell it's called, right? You're sleeping. You're somewhere near the border. How you going to sleep at night? All right, let's go to sleep. You're going to lay there. Your eyes are going to look like you had 10 cups of coffee. You look like a friggin' owl. Why? Because you're waiting. You're waiting for the door to bust open and the machine gun fire to start. You're waiting to get grabbed, dragged down the street, and taken back to Gaza as a prisoner, as a hostage. Because you know it's going to happen sooner or later. In your mind, you're always afraid. Ain't nobody sleeping in those kibbutzes on the border. If you're in northern Israel, those towns that were evacuated from Hamas, you going back to that town? Hey, everybody, go back to the town. Is it safe? Well, technically, we're going to use the word safe. It could have missile come in every now and then. Could the Hamas wake up one day and decide to come in and kill everybody in the town? Could happen. Just saying, but go back. Everything will probably be okay. You going back to that town? Not I, brother. Not I. And not a whole lot of people. Israel can never be the same. Can never be the same. The only thing the U.S. could maybe do is maintain the bases and try to just keep the bases going. But as far as Israel as a viable economic nation, I don't see how you do that under the circumstances. And might I add, the Muslim countries' normalization, they ain't even going to want anybody from Israel anywhere near. Or if you're Israeli, you're going to be able to travel to the Middle East, or you're going to be, hey, we'll go to Egypt, to the Red Sea, and go biking. Bad idea. You ain't coming back. They'll find you cut up, floating in the Red Sea. You'll be shark food. It will be safe. There will be nowhere in the Middle East safe for Israelis to travel or safe for Americans to travel. You will, or people from Europe. Ain't gonna be safe there. I wouldn't go there. So I may have to go to the area here in the next couple of weeks. To be quite frank, I may be going to that part of the world. But my point is this: I ain't going to be comfortable, but I mean, hopefully I'll be passing through. But at any rate, my point being this: although believe it or not, you know what I've heard? I have heard this before. I've heard from people who were in the Middle East that a lot of time the Muslims will say to black people, "We ain't got no beef with you." Yeah, I've literally known people who are in the Middle East who have had some of the Muslims in the area say, "We ain't got no beef with you, black folks. You're an American, sure, but our beef is not with you. Go on and walk peaceably, right?" But that don't mean that I may not be in a bus full of Americans that gets bombed or something. Hey, but the wrong place at the wrong time. So anyway, bottom line, you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this: the Middle East will never be the same. It's not going to be safe for Israelis or safe for Americans. And it's not going to be safe for Israel to exist. The United States, in order to maintain that, is going to, I'll put it like this: they're going to have to keep them damn carriers there. What good is it to have an aircraft carrier that's unsinkable if the only way to maintain that is to have a bunch of sinkable aircraft carriers in the region to make sure that the unsinkable one, think about it. How paradoxical is that? We've got an unsinkable aircraft carrier. What do? Well, we got to have a bunch of sinkable aircraft carriers in the area. Otherwise, that one's going to get literally sunk. It's done. It's toast. They're going to overrun it. It's going to get taken out. It's going to have missiles every day. God only knows what could happen. So we got a fleet of sinkable aircraft carriers just to protect the unsinkable one. At that point, the unsinkable one, maintaining it and protecting it, becomes untenable. That's the problem the U.S. has. If you don't take anything else from this video, take that from the video. The unsinkable aircraft carrier is now protected by sinkable aircraft carriers. And that's the only way that you can maintain the unsinkable one, which means it ain't an aircraft carrier anymore. It is a asset, a military outpost that is highly vulnerable. And it has to be protected. And all the energy it's going to take to protect it means it ain't worth it. But they got to keep it. They don't know what else to do because the empire is contracting from over in Ukraine. Colombia of South America was a U.S. military installation. They had a bunch of kooks running it, Yvonne Duque and these other whack jobs and all kind of crap all over the place going on in Colombia. And guess what happened? They lost Colombia. What's his name? Petro is now the president, and they're like, "Crap, we lost." What happens every time you lose a puppet leader in a country? Guess what? The U.S. still has the bases in the country because the president knows if he just says to the U.S., "You guys got to leave the country," they'll kill them. They're gangsters. They're thugs. They'll literally just kill them, and everybody in the world knows that. But now. The empire is starting to contract. And when empires contract, they usually contract. And you've heard this about a person saying how I went broke slowly and then suddenly. That's how empires contract. Slowly and then suddenly over. And keep in mind something. When I say suddenly, I don't mean over a 2-day period. In the context of history, what was Rome in power? Like 800 years or 1,000 or something? U.S. empire ain't going to make 25 or 30 years at best, right? Suddenly could mean 10 years, 5 years, but it could mean a lot less because there's another shoe that's poised to drop at the worst possible time. Watch the bond market, watch the inverted yield curve, watch what's happening in the markets. If the United States, the nature of neoliberal capitalism is disaster. It's also been called disaster capitalism, neoliberal capitalism, right? It's a fake, it's a fraud, it's a self-serving racket for the rich. And it tends to collapse regularly. And they haven't fixed it since 2008. They've made it worse. So what happens? Think about this. What happens internally right now? Because right now, there's a bunch of internally, there's a political tug of war. I'm not going to call it a civil war, a tug of war going on. You've probably been following Gavin Newsom meeting with Xi Jinping, trying to get Xi Jinping to come to California. In other words, you got the neocons saying we hate China, we want to go to war with them. And you have another faction, of the ruling elite, who now Its face is Gavin Newsom. And Gavin Newsom, right, saying, hey, Xi Jinping, let's be friends. Why don't you come hang out in San Francisco? Now, asking Xi Jinping to come to San Francisco, that tells you that there's a faction of the ruling elite in the United States that doesn't want war or friction with China. They're trying to make money. What do we know about San Francisco? And what could we get from that? Number one, Gavin Newsom's the former mayor of San Francisco. And San Francisco is, what's that say? What's around San Francisco? All of the tech giants. What's there? Palo Alto, etc. What's there? Silicon Valley. Is it an accident that the mayor and governor of Silicon Valley, where they're the ones that are taking all the big losses from the neocons' anti-China crusade, and that their boy goes to China to meet with Xi Jinping, and then where's he asked Xi Jinping to come hang out? San Francisco. So there's an internal tug of war going where there's a faction of the ruling elite. I suspect the tech giants, and I also suspect Obama's involved with that group. And they probably own Kamala Harris, but she's not smart enough to be an asset for them. But at any rate, but she's loyal from what I hear. She's kind of loyal to Obama. I don't know. The Hillary people were behind her. So who's the factions? It's not clear what's going on with those factions, but one thing's clear. There are factions that are fighting it out. There are also now factions on Capitol Hill. You've got the staffers now. There's numbers of staffers. I understand 100 or more who've written a letter to Biden saying, hey, you need to back off. And on this, we need to be a little more humane with the Palestinians. So you've got a brewing civil war going on Capitol Hill between the members of Congress and the people that are working for them. So you got that going on. There's a lot going on internally with the empire. What happens if we get 2008 style crackdown or worse? At the time when Biden's saying we got 100 billion to go to Ukraine and this much has to go, 10, 20 billion for Taiwan, 10, 20 billion for Ukraine, 50, 60 billion for Israel. And might I add, in the same way, you could give Ukraine $1 trillion right now if they ain't got no artillery shells. Remember what I said about being on a desert island? I got 2 coconuts and you got $1 million in cash. Give me a half of that million. I'm not going to do it. Okay, then you ain't getting one of my coconuts and you'll be dead in 4 days and I'll be fine because I got twice as many calories as I need. Right? Give me that $500,000. You better cost up to $500,000. That's the way it works. Right? And so they could give Ukraine $1 trillion. They got nowhere to buy the things that they need. It ain't going to work. Same way with Israel. We're going to give Israel 60 billion. You can give them 120 billion. You can give them 600 billion. What difference does it make? They need things like artillery shells, missiles. They need missiles for their Iron Dome. The U.S. don't have them. We're running out. So you just hand them the money. What are they going to do with it? Put it in a bag? Yes, sirree. We're fighting the Muslims. What do you got? We got bags of money. Great. What are we going to do with those bags of money? We'd like to buy stuff, but it ain't available yet. Yeah, we put in an order at Amazon, but they told us we're prime normally a day, but because the stuff's not made, it's going to be about 4 years before they can get us the artillery shells we need. But you got the money. So all this money in Congress, they're talking about we're going to give 60 billion Ukraine. I mean to Israel. And Israel then is going to call Lockheed Martin, blah, blah, General Dynamics, everybody that they get this stuff and say, all right, we need missiles and rounds. And we got nothing but money. And they're going to say, great, we can get them to you. When? We're backlogged about 3 years right now, but we can start delivering in 6 months. Can Israel afford to fight this war for 6 months? No, they can't do it. At that point, the United States is completely paying all the bills for Israel because they got no economy. And that's coming. And ain't nobody buying nothing from Israel. Around the world, people see Israel. They're starting to see Israel as a rogue state. They're going to stop buying stuff. So the U.S. empire is going to contract even more. U.S. empire loses Israel, which it's already kind of lost Israel. It's going to fight. But everybody thinks those ships are there to attack Iran. I think the ships are there. The sinkable aircraft carriers are there to protect its unsinkable aircraft carrier. The U.S. is looking at Israel saying, we got to protect Israel with everything we have. Before they even worry about Iran, they got to go in there and fight and get control of things. Right now, they're scared to death of Hamas. First of all, Hamas is right on their border, and they're afraid that Hamas will come into it. They're like, well, we'll bomb the crap out of Hamas. Yeah, sure you can, but before you do, they're going to unleash holy hell on Israel's military bases. Again, what, 1,000 missiles per base? You got no bases. And Israel's at that point, if Israel's bases get hit by Israel's air force is done, and they got to use the U.S.'s air force, and then it ain't an unsinkable carrier anymore, is it? You have an unsinkable carrier. Good news, we got a carrier. Bad news, we got no planes for the carrier. We got no places for them to land because all the airfields have been obliterated. So they screw around with Hamas. They piss Hamas off. That's one of the reasons they're like, yeah, we're going in. There's a number of reasons that they're doing excursions into Gaza and coming back out. They're going in and coming back out. And one of the reasons are because, hey, you know what? A, they'll take a bad punch for going in, and I forgot B. For God's sake, I'm getting like Biden. I can't remember. But at any rate, they'll take a bad punch for going in. That's one of the big reasons. But at any rate, you get the point that they have to protect Israel. And I might add, they told Israel what? Don't go in with a full invasion because they'll get turned into mincemeat. But also, they're afraid of Hamas coming in. Because if Hamas comes in and fully, let's say Hamas that launches some attacks, and then the U.S. says, okay, that's it. We're sending a bunch of planes and we're going to bomb the crap out of Hamas. And Hamas says, okay, we're going to open up on you. And they, as I said, 1,000 missiles for every military base. Every military base in Israel gets 1,000. Oh, by the way, if it's an airfield, they get 5,000 missiles, 2,500 missiles on day one. Day one. Next day, they get 1,000. They get 500 a day for 5 days, whatever, right? And no airfield can stand up to that. It's going to be turned to rubble. And you now have an unsinkable aircraft carrier with no aircraft and no way to fly aircrafts out of. And then at that point, what good is Israel to? And what are you going to do? Hey, we're going to go in and rebuild the airfields. And what do you think Hamas is going to do? Blow them the hell up again? They're in the empire is in a contracting mode. Keep an eye on it. Thanks a lot, everybody. So we're now going to see if we have any super chats to. Oh, okay. So we're going to the super chats. Evandro, thanks for the super sticker, Evandro. Ooh, and there's got to be some more somewhere. If there's not, that's fine too. Oh, got another one. All right. ETE News and Views says, Garland, your last live had a live from Al Mayadeen about Israeli base in Eritrea. Source of photo is September 1, 2019 from Times of Israel. The sources allegedly were Eritrea and Israel. Okay, thanks a lot. I don't know. I'll keep an eye on that. That was reported, but in Al Mayadeen. So, hey, don't blame me. I will report what I see. And if I see it seems, Al Mayadeen, for the most part, is usually pretty reliable. So, as they say in war, the first casualty is truth. There are going to be lies. There are going to be false things reported. So I'm going to do the best I can. Whatever I report, keep in mind that as best I can, I'll try to report what's coming from reliable sources. Every now and then you can miss. So I don't know anything about that. But thanks a lot. Looks like that pride comes before a fall is proving to be true for Israel and by extension, the USA. You are correct, Cobb fan. How about we go here? Where does Klaus Schwab and the WF fit in? They've been too quiet. Their thing is unipolar world, limited wars, reduced population, global warming. Well, I mean, they don't have to fit in. They're not the kind of guy. They're not the kind of people that are at the forefront of this. They're in the back pushing what they want. So they're not going to be in the forefront so you can see what they're doing. How about we go next to JVP. Thanks a lot, JVP. I guess that's it. Only JVP. All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. Camilla V, the boss's daughter, Abdi Hassan, everyone, Impars, of course, Chicken Patty. She is the philosophical of conscience of this channel. Without Chicken Patty, this channel doesn't exist. So, all right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. My main man, Sparky, I don't see him in the house, but Sparky is another very important cog in this wheel, as is Camilla V and Kinky and on and on and on. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Do me a favor. Rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. Go over there, join, and become a member. Doesn't cost a dime. Follow me on Telegram. You got patreon.com. You know how Patreon works. I certainly appreciate anybody can support the channel. PayPal is another option for supporting the channel. Buy me a coffee is awesome. You go to buymeacoffee.com/Garland NH, and it'll say buy Garland a coffee, $5. How many coffees? That's up to you. And buy me a coffee now. You can do just like Patreon and say, if you choose, I want to become a subscriber, and I'll do a monthly $5, whatever you would choose. So buy me a coffee is great for that. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Peace. I'm out.